Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode on Monday Positivity. And today we're diving into a powerful and eye opening book that sheds light on one of the most significant yet often overlooked influences our lives, our parents. And the name of the book is Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And whether you are familiar with the concept or just discovering it, this episode will provide a clear understanding of how emotionally immature parents can impact their children, and most importantly how we can heal and move forward from it. So in a way, I'll be sharing the review of this book, and I'll also be sharing whatever the author has shared in the book. I'll share the tips also by the end of this episode. And if you are someone who is, uh, discovering this topic, or who is interested in this topic, or maybe is going through the same, I think this episode is going to be, I hope this episode will provide you lots of insights. So let's first try to understand, uh, let's start by unpacking what the author means by emotionally immature parents. So she describes these individuals as adults who, despite their physical age, lack the emotional development required to provide healthy emotional support to their children. Now, these parents might be stuck in self centered, childlike behaviors, making them unreliable, emotionally unavailable, or even manipulative in their relationships. And this manipulation can be different for different children. If, let's say, the child is not doing what you want them to do, so what the parent wants the child to do, maybe the parent will stop talking to the child, right? Or it could be like, there are different ways how emotionally unavailable or emotionally immature parents behave in relationships. And the crucial takeaway here is that it's not about blaming the parent, right? So I'm not saying that our parents are villains. Most emotionally immature parents did not have bad intentions. So if you feel like your parent is immature, it's not like they have bad intentions. They are simply stuck in patterns of behavior that they likely developed due to their own upbringing or life circumstances. So maybe they did not receive the right kind of treatment in their childhood, and now they don't know better, right? They didn't receive the tools to process and express emotions healthily, and as a result, they struggle to meet their children's emotional needs. Now, let's also understand the impact on children. So, the author emphasizes that growing up with emotionally immature parents can leave lasting effects on children. Children of such parents often feel confused, they feel neglected, they feel dismissed, they feel invalidated. They also long for their parents' love, they long for their parents' validation. They want their parents to be proud of them. They might feel as though their emotional needs are constantly being sidelined, constantly being neglected, or they may develop a deep sense of self doubt and insecurity. And one key point that author highlights is the emotional loneliness these children experience. Despite the physical presence of a parent, they may have felt emotionally isolated, which can lead to attachment issues later in life. Also, difficulty in forming trusting relationships, or even anxiety and depression. Many people raised in these environments develop coping mechanisms like people pleasing, hyper independence, so they don't want to be dependent on anybody, or even emotional repression because they have learned not to expect consistent care or understanding from their parents. This cycle of emotional neglect can carry over into adulthood, leading to unresolved trauma, low self esteem, and the tendency to attract emotionally immature partners or sometimes friends. And this book actually encourages readers to become aware of these patterns so they can start the healing process. Now, let's also understand how you can recognize the types of emotionally immature parents. And in the book, the author outlines four main types of emotionally immature parents. Let's break them down. The first type is the emotional parent. And this type of parent is highly reactive, very emotional, they are unpredictable, and they are often overwhelmed by their own emotions. Their children might feel like they are constantly walking on eggshells around them because they never know what will set their parent off. The children are not able to express themselves because maybe they will, so children feel that maybe they will say something and it will set the parent off, and the parent will react, right? Overwhelmed by their own emotions. Second type is the driven parent. These parents are hyper focused on achievement and success. They are more concerned with external validation. So no matter the uh, how the environment is inside the house, it is very important to have external validation. Outside, it should all look good. And they are also concerned with how their child reflects on them. So if the child does something outside, like outside the house, so the child does something that the parent does not approve of, the parent will be, like angry or something, right? And often, children of these parents feel pressure to perform and meet high expectations. They have to be well behaved. They cannot express their needs because if expressing their needs would mean that, it will reflect bad on parent, child learns to, suppress the needs. And again, it leads to feelings of anxiety or inadequacy in the child. Third type is the passive parent. This parent avoids conflict at all costs. And this parent also lacks the emotional capacity to offer real support. And their children might feel abandoned or that their needs are not important because the passive parent doesn't step up when needed. And the fourth type is the rejecting parent. The rejecting parent is dismissive, emotionally unavailable, and sometimes even harsh. And children of these parents are often left feeling unwanted, unloved, because their emotional bids for connection are met with indifference, with coldness. And the author stresses that these categories are not rigid, and parents can exhibit traits from multiple types. So it's not like a person is only emotional parent or only driven parent. Maybe they have all these traits, right? But why is it important to understand it? Recognizing these patterns is very important. It is a critical first step toward understanding the emotional landscape you grew up in. Now, let's also understand how these how these emotional landscapes, any landscape you grew up in, how it can affect your adult relationships. And I think this is one of the most impactful sections of the book, where the author discusses how emotionally immature parents can actually shape our adult lives, particularly our relationships. And many adults who were raised by emotionally immature parents may struggle with forming healthy reciprocal relationships. You might find yourself either seeking out relationships with similar emotionally unavailable people or even becoming the overly responsible caregiving partner who sacrifices their own needs for the other person. And this dynamic can often play out in friendships, romantic relationships, or even professional settings, where we either continue to seek validation from emotionally immature figures or subconsciously take on roles that mirror the dysfunction we experienced in childhood. And this cycle can keep us trapped in unfulfilling, toxic, or one sided relationships, reinforcing feelings of inadequacy and emotional loneliness. So, how do we break free from this cycle? Well, the author offers several strategies for recovery, which focus on becoming aware of the patterns, healing emotional wounds, and learning to set boundaries. Now, let me share a few key steps that the author suggests in the book. The first step is towards healing is acknowledging that your parents may not have had the emotional maturity to provide what you needed. You have to recognize and accept the reality. And I was scrolling, YouTube the other day, and I came across this short, a YouTube short, where the lady, she was telling that we have to understand that our parents are not heroes, they are not superheroes, they are human beings just like us, right? When you start putting your parents on pedestal, you cannot see the shortcomings that they may have, because ultimately even they are adults, they are also learning their way through this world, and they are trying to do their best, right? So first step is that you have to acknowledge that your parents are human beings and they may not have had the emotional maturity to provide the child what child needed, right? And I know this can be a difficult realization because it often means confronting painful truths about your upbringing, about your childhood. But this awareness is liberating because it allows you to stop internalizing their behavior as your fault. And in most of my episodes, when we talk about different strategies to deal with different things in life, I always start with acknowledging, right? And I love that the author says that you have to acknowledge first, because if you really want to heal something, like if there is a wound and you want to heal it but you keep denying that there is a wound, how would you heal it, right? So if you really want to heal something, first you have to acknowledge its presence. Yes, it's there. Now let's see what we can do about it, right? So that's the first step. Recognize, acknowledge, and accept the reality. Step number 2 is to reclaim your emotional freedom. Emotionally immature parents often use shame, guilt, or manipulation to control their children's emotion. So they will tell you, you make me feel bad in public. You did this. I didn't teach you. It reflects, this is something like, I didn't teach you this. You are, again, making me feel bad. Or they will use some other tactics. If you did this, I will really feel bad. You're trying to hurt my emotions or something, right? The author encourages you to recognize these tactics. Maybe your parents are using it without knowing. You have to recognize these tactics and reclaim your emotional independence. You no longer need to seek their approval as an adult. You don't have to fall into the old patterns of emotional caretaking. And that also leads to our next step, which is about setting boundaries. You need to learn to set healthy boundaries with your parents. And I know we've been talking about setting boundaries in relationships, at workplace, and all of that. And maybe this will be something like it's the rub, right? You have to set healthy boundaries with your parents and also others. Could be your relatives too, could be your friends too. Because when I'm talking about, when we talk about inner child healing concept, like, yes, it all starts in your childhood, right? And certain things happen after, like, you become an adult or something. And again, not everything is like your like the fault of your childhood upbringing, but usually when you are wounded, when your inner child is wounded, it affects all the relationships, right? Like we discussed earlier, if let's say your parents were not emotionally available for you and they were dismissive, you will start being the caregiver in all relationships. Maybe your own needs are not met, but that's what you learned as a child, that your needs are not important, right? So you have to learn to set healthy boundaries with your parents and with others also for your emotional well being. And like we discussed earlier, boundaries are not about shutting people out, but rather about protecting yourself from behaviors that are harmful to you. This can even mean limiting contact or disengaging from conversations that leave you feeling drained or invalidated. And one of the most empowering takeaways from the book, and my next step also, is the focus on building emotional resilience. By developing healthy relationships with emotionally mature individuals, and also by practicing self care, setting healthy boundaries, and nurturing your emotional world, you can fill the gaps left by emotionally immature parents. You can seek therapy if you want. You can, self reflection is a great tool in this journey toward recovery. And last step, the author emphasizes the importance of practicing self compassion. See, healing from childhood wounds takes time, and it's very important to be gentle with yourself throughout the process. It's okay to grieve the relationship you wished you had with your parents, while also recognizing the strength and resilience you've developed as a result, right? And overall, I think this book is a transformative guide for anyone who has struggled with the lingering effects of an emotionally neglectful or immature upbringing. And the author's insights were like, when I was reading it, it was really helpful. It can help you also understand that you can break free from the patterns of your past and create healthier, more fulfilling emotional lives. It's about reclaiming your power, learning to trust your emotions, and building relationships that honor your true self. Thank you for tuning in today. Um, I know it's a heavy concept, but I hope this episode, has given you valuable insights into emotionally immature parents and the steps you can take to recover and how it also impacts you, right? We can't talk about recovery if you, again, are not aware of where the wound is coming from, right? Or what is hindering your progress in life. So I think once you start understanding, like, why you behave, uh, in certain situations the way you behave, you can take the steps to recover from it. And I tried to summarize the book in a way, like try to give you a review of the book, but at the same time I really wanted to not just give review but also share some practical tips, some insights. And I hope it helped you. It has given you something to think about and it has helped you in some way. And if this episode resonated with you, don't forget to share it with someone who might benefit from it. And until next time, take care of yourselves and prioritize your emotional well being.